Welcome to another Coaster Kev video. Today I'll be talking about my journey to becoming a roller coaster enthusiast and my travels so far. Enjoy! For those of you who don't know, a coaster enthusiast is a crazy person who travels around the world riding roller coasters and drives huge amount of miles to get from park to park. All joking aside, I just wanted to thank El Toro Ryan for letting me use his off-ride video. My story starts very early, growing up in Southern California. As a kid, I would often go to Knott's Berry Farm, getting season passes for what seemed like most of my childhood. When I was about 8, my brother took me on my first big roller coaster with Montezuma's Revenge. I remember being so scared to go upside down, but he pressured me into it. As we got seated and strapped in, only restrained by a lap bar, I remember the anxiety building. Then all of a sudden, the lap bars pop open and I'm freaking out. Luckily, the staff assured me that everything was fine, and then we were ready to go. As we launched out of the station at over 50 miles per hour, passing through the decorative lit up circle and into the loop and up the spike, I remember all the adrenaline pumping as we made our way backwards through the station and up the other spike. That feeling of weightlessness or airtime gave me butterflies. As we came back to Earth and came into the station, I was ecstatic. I immediately wanted to go again. Ever since then, I loved roller coasters and would frequent Six Flags Magic Mountain and continued going to Knott's. Growing up, I loved going on Ghost Rider and it was definitely my favorite roller coaster, but I know there was something more out there. In 2019, I decided to jump fully in and attend Coaster Mania on a last minute whim through some random enthusiast selling 2 tickets on Twitter, since he bought the wrong ones. Luckily for me, the other person who bought the second ticket ended up meeting up with me to hang out and help make the trip less confusing. Going to Cedar Point always looked amazing, with it being praised as the self-proclaimed coaster capital of the world, and their airtime filled Still Vengeance sweetened the deal. The all-day event was amazing, and was filled with so much exclusive ride time, or ERT, that I was easily able to do all the roller coasters throughout the 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. event. It was an amazing time not having to wait in lines at the beginning and end of our day. I was in heaven. I even made a friend out of it, as we ran from ride to ride all day long and traveled more than 20 miles going up and down the peninsula. All in all, it was a thrilling day, but very exhausting. I would definitely recommend it if you only have a day to spend there and get all the credits. After that, I was hooked. I started looking to other places I could go on a budget that I could get the most bang for my buck. However, I didn't plan anything else for the rest of the year since I had a honeymoon planned with my wife in Switzerland. Unfortunately, I had no plans for 2020 for obvious reasons, but I started getting into the hottest thing since Roller Coaster Tycoon, Planet Coaster. I started following Channel 5 Gaming and loved what I saw and wanted in, but I didn't have a gaming PC. Luckily, they released a console version that I started playing and entering in contests to compare to others and get critiqued and improve my parks. I continue to play today and will release some videos and shorts on some of my creations in the future. With parks opened up again, I ended up getting a SeaWorld and Knott's Platinum Pass for 2021, so I could do a bunch of trips and boost my credit count, which was just below 100 at the time. My first trip was going back to Coaster Mania with my wife and sister-in-law. Again, it was an amazing time, but I thought the ERT was not as good as my first time. We ended up staying in Hotel Breakers, which was very convenient, especially for taking a break in the middle of the day to last a long, hot day. Top Thrill Dragster was my wife's favorite. Luckily, they got to ride it before the accident, and hopefully again soon for the reimagining, which looks to be very exciting. My second trip of the year was to San Antonio, Texas. I started off my trip with SeaWorld and was amazed to see how empty the park was, even in July. I was excited to try all the new rides, especially Texas Stingray and Steel Eel. Steel Eel was, by far, my favorite ride there, and I was able to marathon it with multiple back-to-back rides. I ended up getting my 100th coaster credit on Wavebreaker, the rescue coaster, even though I thought it would be at my next park. SeaWorld San Antonio was a beautiful park, but didn't take up too much of the day, so I planned to go to ZDT's, a small family fun center that has a shuttle wooden coaster that I was curious to try. Their all-day ride and game wristband was pretty reasonable, and I was able to ride Switchback in every seat quite easily. I highly recommend going out to ZDT's so you can ride Switchback, which is only about 30 to 40 minutes out of your way from SeaWorld Orlando. It's not the most intense, but it's a really outstanding experience. The next day, I went to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, which I had heard about the beautiful scenery that was unlike any other Six Flags park. It did not disappoint besides Batman and Poltergeist being closed. It was definitely much more crowded than SeaWorld, but understandably so. Even though I thought Iron Rattler would be the best there, I thought Wonder Woman was better, but it may have been from the hype of it being my first single rail coaster by RMC. However, I still thought Twisted Colossus was better than both of them. I'm excited to get out there again to see if anything changes. The third trip of the 2021 was to Orlando. I was very excited to see some of the world's best parks, but I wouldn't make it to the Disney parks, and still have yet to do so. Our first stop was to the Universal Resort. We started at Studios, with Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket being my favorite, next to the Mummy, which had a fun video that I didn't expect at the end, since I thought it would be like the other one in Hollywood. Additionally, Diagon Alley was amazing, but it took a second pass to find it. I also thought the Gringotts ride was way better than Forbidden Journey, since it told a better story and had cooler special effects. The next day we went to Islands of Adventure. I was extremely excited to ride on Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure, as well as Velocicoaster, and they didn't disappoint. We were lucky enough to spend our whole day there and ride multiple times using the single rider line. Velocicoaster ended up being one of my top favorite roller coasters, and still is today. The following day we went to SeaWorld Orlando for the first time. I finally got to see how good Mako was, but it didn't wow me like I thought it would. Granted, it was fun, but it wasn't super forceful like Goliath. It's definitely fun, smooth, and graceful though. Overall, SeaWorld left me wanting more, especially seeing Icebreaker there, but not yet open. On my final day, we went to Busch Gardens Tampa. It was probably the most overwhelming since the park seemed huge. I had a blast getting on all the rides except Shikara and Iron Gwazi, which wasn't open yet. I loved Falcon's Fury, with the amazing tilting as well as the forcefulness of Montu. I remember the trip feeling like there was something missing, and I knew Iron Gwazi would change that. It was extremely hot, so the giraffe bar was a welcome retreat to grab a cold one while watching the Serengeti animals and safaris drive through. Busch Gardens Tampa was a great way to finish the trip. In December 2021, we found some cheap tickets to go to Atlanta, so I knew I wanted to go to Six Flags in Dollywood. It was fun to learn that Six Flags Over Georgia was the second Six Flags park, and had the carousel of the old Riverview Park that my grandpa worked at in Chicago back in the 1930s. I really liked the look of this park, and I fell in love with Goliath. It immediately became my favorite B&M hyper. I felt like I was going on a wild ride in comparison to Mako, which was so graceful. Additionally, Twisted Cyclone was wild and fun, albeit a short RMC. Definitely my second best park. Batman at this park was also packed with a punch, and was probably my favorite I've ridden for its clone. Overall, it was a great park, but didn't take too long, probably since it was the off-season. It gave me plenty of time to go to the Coca-Cola Museum and try all the tastings there, which I also recommend doing. Next day, we made our way to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, so we could go to Dollywood. I didn't know too much of what to expect besides Lightning Rod, Cinnamon Bread, and Dolly Parton, but was so impressed with this park. From the amazing Christmas lights to the fun coaster lineup, this park blew me away and remains my favorite park for the amazing theming and ride lineup. Thunderhead was a ride that I hadn't heard much on, but I thought it was amazing and gave Ghost Rider a run for its money as my favorite wooden coaster. Its intense laterals and airtime were action-packed and tons of fun. With a combination of that Lightning Rod, the park had a wonderful 1-2 punch. My only disappointment was just Mystery Mine, which I thought was beautifully themed, but somewhat boring besides the finale. Another highlight was Tennessee Tornado, which I thought was extremely quirky and oddly shaped inversions, but a lot of fun. However, it was quite short. Luckily, the lines were pretty empty on our trip, and we enjoyed a full day followed by a few hours the next day before ending our trip back in Atlanta.
I wanted to get some of the credits on some of the coasters I missed for the grand opening, as well as try some new parks. First stop was back to Orlando, where I was able to get my first ride on an Icebreaker. It was definitely crazy ejector time, but I'm excited to try it again without the comfort collars. I also got to try their Seven Seas Food Festival, and definitely don't recommend the 18 tastings for one person, even if you're there the whole day. It was quite a bit of food, but a fun time trying everything. My next stop in the same evening was for Mindblower at Fun Spot Kissimmee. The ride is definitely rough, but I still had fun, until I got a headache, after about a few rides. Definitely looking forward to the iBox track that it's getting from RMC to help make it smoother. The next day, I went to Busch Gardens Tampa to finally ride Iron Gwazi. I was lucky enough to ride it about 15 times that day and had a blast. It blew me away with its fast pacing and crazy intense wave turn that felt like you were going to hit the lift structure. but I still favored Velocicoaster as my favorite Florida coaster. It ended up being a pretty empty day, so I also got to spend plenty of time trying out Shikra after missing it my last time due to refurbishment it was getting. My next trip was in May 2022 when I flew out to Raleigh, North Carolina for my Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Kings Dominion, and Carowinds trip. At Busch Gardens, I bolted to Pantheon so I could get the newest credit there. It was a very fun ride, but nothing compared to Iron Gwazi that I ride a couple of months ago. It was missing some more forces, but the swing launch definitely delivered. Another highlight was Verbolten, which was much more intense for a family coaster than I would have imagined. I was sad to have to miss Alpengeist since it was closed that day, but I made it on Griffin, which was fun, but very similar to Shikra. Lastly, it was fun to ride Loch Ness Monster for the iconic interlocking loops. It was definitely weird with its 2 lift hills though. It was a fun day at Busch Gardens, but I was exhausted, so I made my way to Doswell, Virginia, and was very excited to see Intimidator 305 dominating the skyline near my hotel. The next day, I visited Kings Dominion. The park was beautiful, and I loved how sprawling the park was, and the new jungle expedition area was great. I really liked experiencing my first 4D free spin and bobsled coaster with Reptilian. Flight of Fear was closed, so I had to wait until next time, but I got my first ride on I-305. Even though it was an overcast and slightly sprinkling, this ride really showed speed and awesome transitions. I loved how much fun it was despite not being able to keep my eyes open with all the water drops speeding down with a fast pace. Luckily I was able to ride it again without the rain. The park was pretty empty, so I was able to ride everything to my contentment and then made my way back to Carowinds for a 5+ hour drive. After the long drive, I got to Carowinds with about 3 hours before closing and headed straight to Fury 325 to experience it. After a few rides, I got stuck on the brake run while it downpoured for about 5 minutes and then stopped as they finally could get us into the station. It was definitely a wild experience, but gave me a reason to explore more of the park. So I got to try Copperhead Strike, which I thought was really good with all the hang time and positive G's. I finished off the night with Afterburn and some night rides on Fury 325, and really thought Afterburn was my favorite invert. Fury at night was a wild ride and another on a whole nother level, and was so mesmerizing going through the tunnel at night after all the treble clef turnaround. In September, I made my way to Cincinnati so I could go to Kings Island. While at Kings Island, we were able to enjoy a wonderful day, and I was super excited for this great park that has a great coaster lineup. Overall, this park had an amazing lineup, and I really enjoyed Flight of Fair since it had really cool space theming, as well as Mystic Timbers, which I thought was a phenomenal ride and definitely my favorite Woody so far. Another highlight was Adventure Express, which I thought was an incredibly crazily themed mine ride. Overall, I think Orion was all that great because it was kind of slow to me, but maybe I'll have to give it another try. After Kings Island, we drove all the way to Santa Claus, Indiana for Holiday World. It was an amazing day there. From the free soft drinks to the amazing rides with Voyage, as well as Thunderbird, we had an amazing time. The park wasn't too crowded, but still a decent amount of people and a good amount of waiting. But it was still an amazing time as we had a whole day there. I also got to try out a few of the water coasters there, which was definitely a highlight and definitely something you don't want to miss. The charm of Holiday World was really something sweet, and seeing all the different themed areas to the different holidays was quite cool. Voyage is definitely their best ride there, and I'm really excited to go to Hollywood Nights so I can check it out there and do it trimless. My next stop was Kentucky Kingdom to finish up the trip. Kentucky Kingdom was definitely an interesting park. I really enjoyed Lightning Run, but I still thought Storm Chaser was a lot more fun. A sleeper hit of the park was definitely Kentucky Flyer, which I thought was a really great gravity group coaster. The amount of airtime that you got on Storm Chaser is just an amazing thing, and I really enjoyed all the elements. It definitely reminded me of a small version of Steel Vengeance. Overall, I thought the park was very charming. I thought the back area by T3 was actually pretty interesting, but sadly there isn't much out there, but it should be interesting to see what they do with the old plot for T3 now that they're going to be removing it. In October, I was back to Cleveland so I could attend Hollow Weekends at Cedar Point and go to Kennywood for their Phantom Fall Fest. Early October for Hollow Weekends ended up being ideal with very small lines so I could enjoy all the roller coasters without too much hassle. I didn't really do the mazes though. However, that's enough about Cedar Point. First visit to Kennywood. Similarly to Cedar Point, the park was pretty empty during the day for a Saturday until it got later in the day when we were close to the haunted house's opening. I was able to get multiple rides on everything without much need for my Skip the Line pass except for Terminator in the Dark, Steel Curtain, and Skyrocket, as well as some flat rides.
Highlights of the trip for me were Phantom Revenge, Steel Curtain, and Skyrocket. Despite all the hate on the second half of Skyrocket, I really did enjoy it, but do agree it's pretty boring after the top hat and 3 inversions. Steel Curtain was interesting, and a blast at night since it's a blur twisting through that layout. On top of it all is Phantom's Revenge.
Little did I know that it would make it into my top 10 coasters. It was so thrilling during the day, but the night rides were amazing, and I was lucky enough to make it for the last ride of the night, after marathoning for it more than 10 rides in a row. Finishing up last year, I went to Northern California to check out the new Safari Sidewinder at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom for a special event, and then head to California Great America, or CGA, and the same day to finally get all the credits there. Safari Sidewinder was surprisingly fun, as it was similar to the Spinning Wild Mouse at Fun Spot America at Kissimmee, with a crazy fast turning at the end. It was also nice to see them incorporate some terrariums as part of the queue. The last time I had gone to CGA in the summer, it was too crowded, so I only got to go on Gold Rusher, which I thought was overrated, so I was excited to go on everything else on this less crowded winter day. I ended up going on everything and marathoning Railblazer, which I preferred over Fiesta Texas's clone. It felt so much faster and had more whip off the drops. I think the rock work also helped make it more intense with the near misses. Overall, I really enjoyed the park, but we'll have to go back for Grizzly, even though people always seem to hate on it. With another year in the books, I was excited for 2023. This year, I will be going on 3 trips as of now. Starting in May 31st, I'll be heading to Chicago to go to Six Flags Great America, not to be confused with CGA. From there, I'll go to Indiana Beach, then Holiday World for Hollywood Nights. After Hollywood Nights, I'll go to Six Flags St. Louis and then Silver Dollar City. I'm excited to check out these parks for the first time. Feel free to send me any advice you may have, as I definitely appreciate it. My second trip will be with the coaster crew to Hershey Park. Prior to that, I will be going to Six Flags Great Adventure for my first time, so I'm hoping El Toro safely reopens so I can finally try an Intamin prefabricated wood coaster and see how good they are. Lastly, I'll be doing a huge coaster trip with the coaster crew to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden for their Nordic Adventure coaster trip, which I'm excited to do for my first international coasters. I'm excited to get my 300th coaster credit there as well. My trips this year are definitely going to be one for the books, and I'm excited for you guys all to join my journey. It should be a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
If you have any questions about my travels so far, please like, comment, and subscribe on this video. And with that, this is Kev, and I'm coasting out. Have a good one. Special shout out to Coaster Force, El Toro Ryan, and Knott's Berry Farm for the use of their video footage.